Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining. I wouldn't say that I'm an interview expert, but last summer I did undergo a marathon interview period of time called on-campus interviewing, where tons of law firms descended on Stanford's campus, and I did, I think, 22 20-minute interviews within the period of a week. And then in the next 2 weeks after that, I did 5 all-day interviews that were broken up into 25-minute interviews for basically like 5 or 6 hours total at the firm. And of course, applying to law school, applying to college, all of that can also involve interviews. I've interviewed for other jobs before, and I have been on the other side interviewing people for a couple of positions as well. All that to say, I kind of thought about what makes for a successful interview, and I wanted to quickly touch on that. I mean, every interview context is going to be different, and of course, industry to industry, situation to situation, it is going to be different. But I think there are a couple of constants that run through a good interview versus, a pretty mediocre one. And yeah, let's get into those. I'm assuming that you guys don't need me to say, like, greet the person, shake their hand firmly, look them in the eye, smile, all of that. I mean, that's pretty basic, and I'm assuming that if you have gotten to the interview stage, you kind of know how to act and behave like a polite human being. So we're going to skip all that. But I will point out that I find it's always better to dress more formally than not for an interview, and in the legal profession you absolutely should wear a suit. I can really only speak to the women's side of things, but I think a gray, dark blue, or black suit, those are kind of the appropriate colors for an interview. You basically want to be remembered for what you say and what you've accomplished rather than how you look. I would go really minimal on the makeup and the jewelry too. So number 1 is presentation. And again, that's coming from my perspective and my profession, which tends to be a little bit more conservative in the fashion department. I think the most important part of a successful interview comes before the interview, and that is your background research and your prep. When I think about background research and prep, I think about it in 2 different ways. So you want to research the role, obviously, and kind of try to go beyond what's in the job listing. The way to do this, I think, is to try to talk to people who are in the industry or maybe have worked at that specific place before. Read a couple of industry publications if it's that kind of job. Just be conversant about the main issues or any big matters that are coming up in that field, just in case. And that gives you kind of a sense of the contours of the field you're interviewing for as well. Research the office itself, obviously, what kind of work they do, some of the basics of it, like how long has it been around, who are the clients, that kind of thing. So that's one part of it, researching your target. But the other part is preparing your own side of things. So for a lot of my interviews, the interviewer has a transcript and a writing sample and my resume in front of them. Sometimes it'll just be resume. And they might kind of zero in on a random thing, like one of my extracurricular activities or something that I wrote in my writing sample. And they might ask, well, tell me a little bit about this issue. And you definitely need to be prepared to talk about yourself, not just in a general, I am a team player kind of way, but also what you were specifically thinking when you worked on X project, or why you thought that X assignment was an interesting challenge and how you dealt with it, that sort of thing. Know the interviewer, know yourself. It's also going to help if you go a little bit deeper and understand the role that you're interviewing for, not just what are the actual tasks that you would have to do, but what the interviewer wants from their ideal candidate for that position. And that'll help you figure out how you fit into that ideal model. For example, I think this also is a tonal/personality thing, and sometimes, it just doesn't fit your personality, you shouldn't try to force it. But for example, if you're interviewing for a clerkship, which is, where you serve as basically the right hand to a judge, you help them research, you help them do admin stuff, you help them think through issues. You want to present yourself in a sort of flexible light, you're quick to pick up issues. A judge is looking for someone who can do the work quickly and efficiently, who can hold their own in an argument or a discussion about an issue, but ultimately understands who is the final decision maker in the office or in chambers. You definitely don't need to prepare a speech about that specifically, but you might think of how the role itself weaves into the questions and answers that you'll be dealing with. And to the last point about questions, there will almost always be a chance to ask questions of your interviewer. And I know that a lot of interview guides are like, yeah, the questions are super important. Make sure you prepare one or two at least. I would say in my experience, sometimes interviewers just kind of run out of their questions too quickly, and it always helps to be super over prepared with the questions that you have to ask. Because the worst possible thing is, if the interviewer has allotted like 25 minutes for the interview and you finish in like 8 and you just have tons of dead time, that leaves a sort of awkward impression on the interviewer. It's just kind of negative. Like there wasn't enough to talk about to fill the time, so you want to be ready to make a seamless transition. Engage the interviewer. When I was interviewing with law firms, for example, people always love to talk about their own trajectory, why they chose that firm, what the most interesting case they've worked on is, what their dynamic is like, whether they would have done things differently, where they went to law school, the list goes on and on and on. It shows that you have not only prepared like a question or two just for the sake of it, but that you prepared to engage in a conversation. And that skill goes beyond the interview itself, and it goes toward being the kind of coworker that person would eventually want. You can also strategically use these questions to demonstrate to the interviewer that you have knowledge of the industry. You gotta be careful though, the way that you phrase it. So I wouldn't, ask a question like, well, I understand that, in securities litigation, you do X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? Like, obviously, that makes you sound kind of like an asshole, and it opens you up to just being incorrect, which is very awkward. The questions you ask should not just be rote questions for the sake of it, or questions about logistics like what time do people generally leave the office, or how long of a lunch break do you get, or how much do you get paid. Like those kind of questions can come after you have an offer in hand, or after the interview has gone well and they've set you up for the next round, or whatever it might be. The question part is basically your final opportunity to show that you are engaged, that you've done your research, that you're genuinely interested in the interviewer themselves and in the position, and that you are ready to keep the dialogue going. I think all of this basically does apply to any kind of interview. As I go through my schooling and my career, my interview types kind of get narrower as I specialize, but I'm trying to imagine a scenario in which these don't apply, and it's kind of hard. An interview is very stressful for a lot of people. It's stressful for me. Personally, I kind of, before I go, I try to imagine the most competent and well-spoken person that I know and just sort of imagine what they would do, try to inhabit them for a second as a character almost before I go into the interview. I find that doing breathing exercises right before the interview also helps. And just, kind of giving yourself a shake all over and just saying I'm confident, I can do this. But now this is getting really woo-woo. So that's basically all I have for you guys. If you have interview stories that you want to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you have tips that have really worked out well for you, or if you have specific questions about interviews, either for law school, for college, for law-related jobs, or anything else, please hit me up in the comments again. Thank you, as always, for watching. It's been so encouraging and wonderful to see your guys' comments and questions. I just love the interaction side of it. Thank you, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye!